Hello, and thank you for joining today's session on the role of ONA in people analytics. Before we get started, I want to mention a few housekeeping items. Our session today will be recorded, and the link to the replay will be sent out in a follow-up email to all registrants. In order to minimize background noise and disruption, attendees will be in listen-only mode, but can enter comments and questions in the chat box located at the bottom of your screen. Now, without further ado, I'd like to turn the reins over to our distinguished host, Ms. Stella Lupashore.
Thank you so much, Dawn, and welcome everyone to the webinar. It's first in a series of many webinars TrustSphere is organizing, and I'm thrilled to be here with my guest, David Green, who is one of the most prolific writers, and I would say he's the journalist of people analytics, really writing about the experts, the trends, where the space is going, and so grateful for you to be here to share not only your perspective on the ONA and how it influences the thinking and the work that a lot of the organizations are doing these days, but also influencing the thinking of the leaders in the right direction on how to use analytics responsibly for improving the organizational performance and improving the experience of the workforce. Also, I'm joined by Anthony Ebelebanda, who is the Vice President of People Analytics with TrustSphere, and he will be representing the world of technology, actually, and the work that TrustSphere is doing with its clients in applying the organizational network analysis. So, David and Anthony, we're all ready to go?
Ready?
Excellent.
Yeah.
So question to you, David. What is organizational network analysis, and what's the buzz all about? Why are, especially people in our field, so excited about it?
Well, I couldn't really find a really good definition I was happy with. So the best I could find was from Deloitte, which says that organizational network analysis is a structured way to visualize how communications, information, and decisions flow through an organization. But that's a bit dry, isn't it? So I actually prefer the analogy that Manish Goul, the CEO of TrustSphere, uses, in that ONA is like conducting an MRI of the organization. And if we take this a step further, I mean, I feel that ONA enables companies to look at the central nervous system of their organization and see how work really gets done. The behaviors that people really have, and the networks within the organization. And I think it enables them to identify the most pertinent issues and highlight how to make interventions. And why is that important? I think it's important, I mean, if we look at the Deloitte Global Human Capital Trends report from earlier this year, you know, I think it really emphasized the way that organizations are changing. You know, we're kind of moving from that kind of 20th century model of hierarchies and top-down to teams and networks of teams. And ONA can kind of shine a light on how these teams and networks really collaborate and behave. And in terms of when I speak to practitioners, you know, they tell me that these insights can help organizations understand and therefore drive improvements in performance and productivity, but also help to reveal blockages that impact on employee motivation, burnout, which I know Anthony's going to talk a bit about later, and well-being. I think it's also important to say that ONA is not new, but I think what was a very manual process is now powered by new technologies, new ways of working, and the growth in people analytics means we are now able to do ONA at scale, make it ongoing rather than one time, and kind of gain a deeper understanding of what works and what doesn't. And in terms of why are people analytics professionals excited about this? Well, Stella, you and Anthony and I were at the People Analytics and Future of Work conference in Philadelphia in September, which I was fortunate to co-host with Al Adamson, who we all know. And when we polled the attendees on the innovations in people analytics that they were most interested in, it was ONA that emerged as number one. And that's consistent with what I'm seeing elsewhere. And probably the last thing to say on this one, really, the reason I believe this is that, you know, ONA allows us to go a little bit deeper than typical people analytics projects that we've done in the past around predicting attrition, predicting who in our candidate pipeline will be a high performer, what drivers of engagement have the biggest impacts on customer loyalty, revenue and profitability. Those are all really important, but I see that ONA allows us to kind of join those dots together and take it to the next level. And then also the last thing is, I think, organizational network analytics is a way to get business leaders excited about the potential of people analytics, which is great for those of us that are working in the discipline and kind of fighting the fight. So I think it will increase our visibility, our impact, but also the level of investment that potentially can be made to scale teams, tools and technologies. Quite a long answer, but hopefully hope there's enough in there.
It's a great answer, and I really love the analogy to looking at the nervous system of the organization, because it's understanding how the work gets done, how people connect with each other, how the information flows, and dissecting it in a way that helps leaders make better decisions. And who doesn't want to do that? So excellent, excellent. So based on what you've seen in case studies that you've looked at, as well as the clients that you've interacted with along the way, what are some of the problems typically customers or companies try to solve by using this type of analytics? Is there anything in specific that all our audience members will be able to take advantage of and say, oh, this can relate to what I'm dealing with in my organization, I can definitely use it?
Well, I think there's so much that you can do with ONA in the people analytics space, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's getting so much attention. I looked at try to get three different sorts of examples. So one is a large multinational, kind of looking at emails, CRM, and social media data in their sales function, and they were trying to identify, what are the number of opportunities that high performers are working on at any one time, in comparison to lower mid performers. And in this case, this company found for them that the optimal number of opportunities that someone was working on at any one time was 7. But that crucially, within each of those 7 prospects, that the high performers typically had somewhere between 7 and 10 active contacts within those customers, and they were active, and they could see that the traffic going backwards and forwards was significant. And when they compared that to some of the lower medium performers, they found that although they were typically working on more opportunities in parallel, they only had 1 or 2 contacts in each of those prospects, and that kind of helped that organization to kind of train those sort of behaviours into some of their lower mid performers as well, and actually understand the importance of having multiple contacts. It might confirm what we might believe anyway, but it's good to have the evidence that backs that up. Another example, quite a simple example really, a European bank, they're working with Humanize. They wanted to test and prove, they tested and proved their hypothesis that high-performing branches had the most collaborative and interconnected employee networks. And when they looked at some of the lower mid-performing branches, they found that there were 2 or more distinct networks. They couldn't really understand this. They did some further investigation, and they found that with one particular, some of these branches, that they had networks that were relevant to the floor of the building that they were in. Mm-hmm. So there was a good network on the first floor, a good network on the second floor, but these networks never seemed to mix. And that kind of helped the bank move away from having multi-level branches and also implement a desk rotation policy as well. So all really with the idea of making their employees more collaborative and working closer together. And then probably the third example, consumer goods multinational, they're helping participants of its leadership development program analyze areas such as their network reach, their influence, their leadership style, how they and their teams communicate and collaborate together, and also with the rest of the business. What they do is they provide them with each of these people on the program with data that on each of those areas. It enables participants to see the data itself, which is obviously powerful, but it also identifies areas for the people running the leadership development program where individuals can have the specific leadership skills developed across the 8-month program. And then again, what happens during the course of this program is the employee and the company can see how these indicators track and improve over time. And from speaking to that company, I understand that, the people, the participants on the program love it. It really helps them hone the skills that they really need to hone.
How interesting, because the examples you've just given provide such a broad spectrum of solutions, right? It's not just understanding behaviors that are more conducive to a better performance, physical interaction, movement between floors, connection between networks, amplifying the ability or speeding up the ability to integrate. So it's a broad type of spectrum of problems that you can solve by using this type of analytics. In a different way, and at the end of it, it's about connections and studying connections and understanding them better. So, excellent.
Yeah.
So we'll turn now to Anthony. Anthony, from TrustSphere perspective, obviously you help a lot of your clients implement and think through how to utilize this type of solutions. What are some of the specific problems that customers approach you to help them solve? And then, what is success? How do you define whether the problem was solved in the end?
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Stella, for that. The interesting thing is, speaking after David, you always have kind of like such a high bar to follow. So I'm glad to be a practitioner versus a featured speaker. So I can always hide behind that. With regard to TrustSphere and our clients, we've got really broadly two groups of clients. One of them is what I call the traditional client that looks at how they can leverage ONA through the what I call the general employee life cycle, thinking about the onboarding, managing the performance, the development, the retention, and the transition of the employees. And we also have another group that looks more at the social capital of the employee, i.e. the ability of the employee to maximize their network to help them do the work that they want to do. So if I'm thinking about our clients, so from a traditional standpoint, we got people looking at, let's say, onboarding, trying to understand in an organization, do my employees grow their network so that they can be optimum in the work that they want to do. So we look at the growth of some network, especially looking at email. In the corporate world, email is still the number one way of communication, quickly followed by PowerPoint presentation. So being able to kind of like put together a network and the growth of it over time, we can try to understand for some roles, for some of our clients, how it actually help people perform, or if they're actually showing signs of underperforming based on the growth of their network. That's one of the things that people look at. Another way that some of our clients look at things is, as you said before and David mentioned, we're looking at attrition. Attrition is one of the biggest concerns that people have when you think about organization, because it affects institutional knowledge. You have to bring some new people in, so they have to be trained. So there is kind of like the risk of disrupting the day-to-day activity when attrition can't be kind of like managed in the right way. And when we look at attrition, some of our clients also think about preempting the attrition and the kind of like the attributes of it. And one of the big ones is the burnout. So some of our clients are really, really interested in understanding what could be a sign of burnout for their employee. And in order for us to help them, we look at their email networks. And what we do, we look at the average employee and the networks that they have over time. One of the big things that we have at TrustSphere is that we look at networks from a continuum period of time, not at a given moment in time. So it allows us to measure the evolution over a defined period. So when we look at those networks, then we're able to kind of like understand how many emails people send at what time of the day. So for example, if you normally work for say 9 to 5, we have a company that has a 9 to 5 type of working hours, and they were looking at how many employees were sending emails before that time and after that time, and also how many times during the day some of the people were interrupted by having to send emails to other people. So by being able to highlight that, you then create a kind of like a map that shows the people who seem to be constantly on email and during working hours, but also during out of hours time. So when you have that, you can then start to think, okay, can we try to find remedial actions so that those people don't get overburdened? Because if they get overburdened, what happens? It could lead to disengagement, and after disengagement becomes the attrition. So we did that for one of our clients, and the way we look at it, we're trying to measure now if there is, over a period of time, a reduction in the attrition. So when you're asking me earlier on what are the measures of success, it's once we've been able to identify some potential cause and we've kind of isolated people who could be subject of those causes, let's try to look at the remedial actions that have been taken and see if they have a significant improvement on the problem that we're trying to tackle. So that's one of the things that we're looking at right now. I know earlier on I was also talking about the social capital, and there was one big thing it's to looking at right now the difference between men and women. Women are more than 50% of the working population, and they're also more than 50% of the world population. And by 2030, we're going to have more than 1 billion women coming into the workplace. So this is definitely something that people are starting to take very seriously, and they really try to understand why do women seem to have less abilities or wrong, less opportunities to be in the C-suite or senior position versus men. And one of the strong signals that we're looking at is, as I said, who you know, your network. And we're currently working with a very progressive financial institution. And what they've given us access to years of data in their environment. And then we are able to look at the networks that female have built versus male. Because the premise of this analysis is that we think that female build networks to do the job at hand, but men build network to help them get to the next job. And so once we're able to prove that, then the next thing is how can we create some stronger pathways for female to have networks that help them get to those top jobs. So this is some of the use cases and the utilization of network analytics that some of our clients have been doing. And what we're hoping really is that having those positive outcomes or being able to move away from intuition to fact-based analysis allows people to then make decisions and kind of like feel comfortable that they've actually implemented some solution based on some fact versus the intuition. And if I could finish, one thing that I would say is, as David mentioned, ONA is not new. There's been some tweaks to it, but also ONA is not the answer to everything. ONA has to be taken in conjunction with other signals. You can't just start to say, oh, now that I've done some network analysis, I can explain everything. It allows you to comfort yourself in certain aspects that you might have had if you look at some contextual data and you couple this together. But that should be taken in this entirety. So that's what I would say the caveat that I would put in some of the work that's been done in that space.
Excellent, and it's great to hear that it's at the end of the day it's about creating a better work environment, and success is measured in whether people had access to better opportunities, whether people stayed with the company. So it's really tangible outcomes that HR is always on a lookout for solutions to solve. So using the data and the facts helps discover this with factual data instead of just doing it as a gut feeling exercise. So great. When I start thinking about the analysis of emails and analysis of text and chatter, and it gets kind of uncomfortable to some degree. Some could say, look, it's a big brother type of approach. You can read emails, you can see the text. Do you hear, especially David, from your travels, do you hear the same type of concern? And is there a different way of reframing the conversation to show the value versus, intrusiveness of this type of analysis?
Yeah, I think the first thing to say is the technology let us down early, and I think threw me out of the video, so people couldn't see me earlier. But that might have been a better thing for them. Yeah, I mean, ethics, trust, and privacy is for me the most important part of doing people analytics and ONA, and it's also perhaps the part that practitioners have the most challenge with as well. So I saw some fascinating research recently from Insight 222. That suggested that 81% of people analytics projects are jeopardized by ethics and or privacy concerns. And actually that tallies with some research we've just done at IBM as well, which is being published soon, which found that 80% of organizations believe HR urgently needs guidance on the fair and ethical use of people analytics. So yeah, I definitely share your concerns around that. Talking to organizations that have been doing this well and are actually actively looking at email metadata and other social data, some good practice I've seen, I'd say is, firstly, get to know your chief privacy officer. And I think that the technology throw me out again, but I'll carry on talking. Get to know your chief privacy officer. I think that's really important. And if you don't have one of those, there will be someone in the legal department that is responsible for privacy. Every project should get the stamp of approval before you proceed and before you communicate the results. And then I think that extends itself, establishing a governance council with relevant stakeholders from business, HR, IT, and legal to discuss and prioritize. I'm back again. I don't know what the hell's happening with this technology, but it's great to discuss and prioritize the projects that you're working on. Then, have a written code of conduct around how you're going to use employee data, keep it up to date, and share that within the organization. And then the next part is that why not be open and transparent with your employees? I think in fact, I'd probably put that as number one. If you can't explain the benefits to the organization and the employees of using and analyzing that data, then perhaps you shouldn't do it. Yeah, it's messing me around again now. So, I think being open and transparent, and look maybe to do pilots. So some of the companies that I've spoken to, they're big global organizations. Think about doing a test project for a defined employee group, particularly if you're looking at something like email data, and perhaps do it in one country. This will help you get some initial insights, maybe quicker and in a more cost-effective way. It will maybe help you refine what you're doing as well moving forward, and it will help you get some benefits, perhaps not just for the business but for employees as well. And this will help you when you look to extend that project maybe to other countries, maybe some of those countries that have naturally more concerns and more law around use of ethics and privacy. I'm thinking some of my colleagues in Europe here as well. So I think that's important. And maybe when you've shared the benefits, share and communicate the stories on how this has helped the organisation, but also how it's helped employees as well. If I'm an employee and I can understand the behaviours and the networks that I need within the organisation to be more successful, that's great. And if that can help me be better at my job and help my career, that would be fantastic. And I'm just getting something here. Yeah, I think the ultimate goal really is of people analytics is to help measure employee productivity in real time. With ONA, but there has to be an employee side of that as well. So yeah, ethics I think will continue to be probably the main challenge within people analytics, certainly for the foreseeable future. We've got things like the general data protection regulations coming into force in the EU, in May 2018, and I know from speaking to people analytics practitioners that this is a big challenge for them and a big challenge for their organizations. So it should be first and forefront.
Excellent. So we have a few minutes left. Anthony, I guess a question to you. When customers who are not currently using organizational and network analysis would like to pursue or get on a path of utilizing it, what are some of the things that they need to think about? What are considerations for them to engage in this type of work? What advice would you give them to?
I think just to follow up on to what David was saying, if you want to do something around ONA, you need to be very transparent and try to really articulate that there is a benefit to the employee as well as the organization. If you can clearly articulate that that kind of like benefit, people tend to be very supportive and receptive of it. So I would say, first and foremost, try to find a way of conveying that message. Second of all, when you start around this, especially if you're like a team of one or a small organization, try to find the right sponsor so that you can basically move that forward. There's a lot of things that happen in the organization that you can help people solve by looking at ONA. Try to find a sponsor in any line of business, and if people are really receptive and they see the benefits of it, they would then become your advocate throughout the organization. So that's something I would say with regards to when you want to start. Also, again, reinforcing David's point, know your chief privacy officer, chief legal person by name. For us, it's Roland Turner. But I would say if you know that person, they will help you navigate through the meander of legal challenges that could happen. So when you start, find the right sponsor, connect with your legal privacy person, and make sure that they're all aware of what happened so that they can basically clear the way for you. So that would be some of the things that I would say. Now, also, when you're thinking of starting, if you still want to find about the literature and things like that, there's a lot of groups that exist. Like, for example, at TrustSphere, we've got a weekly newsletter that talks about people analytics and bring people together. There is also things that happen in various regions for the meetup groups where you have an exchange of information. I mean, Stella is our host, but she's also the co-founder of the meetup for people analytics in the New York region. So those type of things exist, and you can sign up to it. It's free of charge, and then you can basically bounce ideas with people who've already gone through some of the things that you might potentially going to be going to face when you embark on that journey. So there's a lot of things out there that exist that can support people. Companies have some newsletters. There are some groups that are already there, and if you want, after this, people can reach out to me, and I'm happy to help further with that space.
I want to
add a couple of.
Oh, go on.
I was going to. Sorry, Stella. I was going to add a couple of things to Anthony's very extensive list there. You know, look at the work of Rob Cross. I call him Mr. ONA. He's been working in this space for a very long time, and some good stuff there. Anyone on the call that isn't following Josh Burson and what he writes, then obviously him as well. And I had a great exchange on LinkedIn earlier with John Ingham, who's published a book called The Social Organization recently. I haven't read the book yet, but from the parts that I've seen, I think this is exactly in this space, and would be a useful read for anyone that's interested in it.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Stella.
No, thank you so much. I also want to acknowledge everyone who sent their questions in via chat. We've captured them and we'll address them in the next 24 to 48 hours via email, or we'll reach out directly. I think at this point in time, I'd like to thank my panelists for such a great and informative session and pass it back to Dawn for closing comments. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stella. I'd also like to take a moment to thank all of our panelists today, David Green, Anthony Bella, and Stella, you as well. Information on how to connect with each of you will be included in the follow-up emails all the registrants will receive. As always, feel free to submit any additional questions or comments by a reply to that follow-up email. I want to also thank everyone for joining us today. We hope you found the conversation insightful. Please watch for the next session in our People Analytics Perspective series. We're planning to host that between now and the end of the year. And with that, this event is now concluded. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.